Labvakar. Mans vārds ir Jānis Vanaks, airBaltic korporatīvo komunikāciju viceprezidents. Jūs neiebilst tālāk, šeit noris uz angļu valodā, tādēļ es arī iepazīstināšu ar mūsu galveno viesi, Pjēra Īva Kusto angļu valodā. So I switched to English. I started with the official hello in the official language. So we are very happy to see you here. Before I'll let you now do the technical preparation. And meanwhile, I'd like to tell a little bit of the history why Pierre is here tonight with us on this this very unique occasion. It's because actually it started some time ago. I got a call from Pauli. Pauli, where are you? Show up, please. Yeah. Pauli is a long-standing friend of airBaltic. He sits himself in Helsinki, and he's a lecturer at Haga University, and he always likes to treat his students very well with fantastic lecturers. And he always invites different very interesting guests from all over the world. And he told that he might be having Pierre come over in his first ever visit to the north, to Finland, and he asked if airBaltic could help with tickets. So I said we are always open to help. If Pierre can also, spend one night in Riga, because it's a beautiful place. So it's a bit crispy and cold, so probably not the usual places that you spend your days in, but it's really nice here, and we thought we have very enthusiastic folks here who would actually like to have this unique opportunity, because actually those people, they will not let me lie. The name of Cousteau is actually something that we grew up with from the childhood. We grew up with Cousteau's films, we know about each and every diver. I started reading Cousteau's books when I think I was at the age of 6, and I think many people will share this same feeling. So actually there is a lot of background, a lot of history, why everyone is very thrilled to see you here, and actually to give you this this informal opportunity to talk. We have a lot of students. I think they will ask you questions. We have a lot of airBaltic colleagues, and we also have a number of enthusiastic divers here. So
I think you have to be enthusiastic to dive in Finland.
So actually, some people will share. I don't know. Yes, and in Finland, I have myself in Finland. I've taken a dip in the ice cold, frozen lake when it was -20. I've done it here. It's much warmer. So I took a dip here when it was -15. So it's because we are down south here. So who has actually taken a dip in frozen lake here?
Any divers?
Huh? Frozen lake divers? Okay, good. Some people will share later. So the floor is yours. And the questions come later. Photo opportunities, I think, also come later. So
great.
So welcome and
thank you. Thank you very much for your warm up. Very much for coming. It's a pleasure to see so many people interested in my visit, and I hope that you'll enjoy this presentation about my father and his timeless ocean wisdom, which I'm sure you've all discovered at some point on television. Although I see there's a lot of young people here, and perhaps many of you have never seen a Cousteau movie. How many people here have never seen a Cousteau movie? Don't be scared. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I find that a lot of people that are younger than 25 usually don't even know who Cousteau is. It's very strange to see that there's really a generation gap going on. But anyways, I'm going to give you this presentation about my father, his work, his philosophy, but also about the state of the oceans today, and about the project that I'm leading called Cousteau Divers. And I always start my presentations with this image. And it's an image, as you can see, of the ocean, or the sea. Can any one of you tell me where this picture was taken? No, we can't. And it could be anywhere. And this ocean could be healthy, this ocean could be dead. You wouldn't know. But still, that's what 95% of the people on this planet see and consider as being the ocean. And that's it. Just because our look doesn't go beneath the surface, we can't know what's going on here. Is this a good or a bad picture? You know, is everything fine and healthy, or is this the end of the world and radioactive contaminated waters? We don't know that because we can't see it unless we go beneath the surface. And first off, I'd like to start out by saying, you know, I work in conservation, marine conservation. Marine conservation is not about charity. It's not about sentimental compassion. It's not about hugging trees. Well, it can be, you know, whatever floats your boat. But it's about, ultimately, it's about us. It's about human. It's about human survival, human well-being on this planet. And sometimes it also means making more money by doing things sustainably. So finding an economic sense to conservation is extremely important, or else it's just a charity that seems to have no point. But in fact, the idea here is that we are the ones concerned by our environment. A healthy environment means healthy people. A degraded environment means more diseases, more sickness, more unhappy people. So society and environment are extremely connected. We can't separate them completely, ever. And in everything I'm going to tell you, just keep in mind that the society aspect and the environment aspect are always connected. So, I love to present this picture because it looks cool. But what it is a kind of graphic that's showing the origin of life on Earth and the evolution of life on Earth. So, somewhere around here, 3 and some billion years ago, life, we believe, started, or at least the first signs of life that we know of started in the ocean. And actually, I used to work with the European Space Agency, department of astrobiology, something completely, seemingly unrelated to the oceans. But in fact, when we were looking for the origins of life in space, it turns out that most likely it's right here, at the bottom of our oceans, that life began. And until we have evidence that there's life anywhere else in the universe, well, life on this planet is unique, and it's precious. And even if we found life somewhere else, it would still be precious. But this means we have a responsibility here, as a species that wants to be, considered superior to the other species of the planet, that's dominated all the ecosystems. We need to be able to dominate the future of what we do with life on this planet. So here, just to give you an idea, around here somewhere you have sharks, about 400 million years ago, that appeared. It's a long time ago. These guys have been around forever. And you have the species that progressively colonized the Earth and terraformed the Earth. Because back then, you couldn't, if you took yourself and went back then, you'd die immediately. The atmosphere wasn't breathable, and it took billions and billions of years for microorganisms to build the atmosphere that we're breathing today. And every time you breathe, half of the oxygen in that breath is produced by the ocean. So there's a good, strong, solid survival connection between you and the ocean right now. Even though maybe you don't have the ocean in your life every day, now you know half the oxygen you're breathing is produced by those microorganisms in the ocean. And we appeared somewhere around here, see, making a fire. And ever since, we've loved to burn things. That's what we're the best at on this planet. Anyways, I've got a couple of pictures here from different places I've been diving. I just wanted to share with you, just to show you, and this is what my father has been doing his whole life, what's going on beneath the surface. Again, we don't know what's going on beneath the surface. How can we manage a resource that we can't see? So this is in the Canary Islands, some pilot whales. This is also in the Canary Islands with giant black rays. Some marine protected area with heaps of fish in the Mediterranean. A manatee from Florida, Springs. Seagrass meadows. All these landscapes, all these creatures, they're always fascinating to us because we're not used to seeing them every day. They're just not there at the surface. My father, one of his most famous quotes is, "People protect what they love." Of course, you've all heard that, but how can you love something you can't see? So that's difficult. How can you love marine life? How could you want to protect it if you never see it? So hence my question that I asked one time, I'm going to ask again, how many people here have been scuba diving? Yes, there's plenty of scuba divers, fantastic. So, in fact, you know, we guys, the scuba divers, we are the only people in the world who have a look under the surface. Nobody else ever has a look under the surface of the sea, except for snorkelers. God bless them. And also fishermen are very aware, although they don't directly look at what's going on, they're very aware of the resources in the oceans because they harvest them. So, but just to put the point on the fact that scuba divers and snorkelers, we're the only ones in the world who have an interest, an economic interest, in having a healthy ocean. If the place is dead, we're not going to go diving. If the place is really well protected and with beautiful fish, that's where you're going to have your next vacation. So we are the only category of people on Earth that have an economic drive for a beautiful, pristine environment. And the dive centers who operate, it's the same thing for them. If they have a dead dive site, nobody comes to see them. If they have beautiful dive sites, no one comes to see them. So again, to insist on the economic importance of conservation. These are all quotes from my father, and they're all dated, so it's interesting to see how far back they go, how far ahead they look. This is a picture, of course, of the Earth. Why we call it Earth, I don't know, because it's 70% of the ocean, at least on the surface. But actually, if you take out all that water, that's about how much water is on Earth. That's all the oceans right there. It's a drop, just a drop. So yes, in surface, it covers a lot, but in depth, not so much compared to the crust of the Earth. And this tiny little bubble here is fresh water, drinkable water. Just to show you how precious life is on Earth. You can't have life without water. We don't know any example of life without water. So just to show you again, to emphasize how fragile, how frail the conditions are that keep us alive on this planet. Water and air, unfortunately, have become universal garbage cans. We treat them as garbage cans. This comes from a belief that the ocean is infinite. It will always give fish. It can take as much rubbish as we want, and it will stay the same, because once again, we can't see beneath the surface. So, as you know, water is always connected. All the waters of this planet are connected. So when it rains, it goes into the ocean, it evaporates, it comes back. So whatever we do to the sea, whatever we do to water, whatever we do to air, comes back to us in a form or in another, in a country or in another. That's another thing. Air and water don't have boundaries. They don't have frontiers. They don't stop like the cloud of Chernobyl on the frontier of France, like we were told back in those days. Air and water are connected, and this is why I think it's so important that countries get together, at least for the management of those two resources, air and water, because without them, there's no human life possible. And again, they don't know any borders, so it's an international responsibility, in my opinion, to manage these two resources. And in a more poetic way of saying it, this is my father's quote, in the water inside your eye right now, there could be a molecule of Cleopatra's bath water, a bit of the Nile that floated Moses' cradle, and a fraction of the blood of a dinosaur who died 80 million years ago. That's just my father's poetic way of telling you that all this water is connected. And actually, today, we're faced with another problem yet, a population problem on this planet. I call it a problem because it's not controlled. Anything that isn't controlled in the environment is a potential problem. And right now, we're reaching 7 billion humans on this planet. Each one of them having a right to more resources, demanding more resources for his personal satisfaction. And we are going to be confronted, if we aren't already, with the finiteness of our planet. That we used to believe infinite, that the oceans were endless, the plains would go on forever. Now we know it's finite, and there's more and more of us. So where do we stop? Where do we find the balance between how many of us are on this planet, how much each one of us gets, and how many resources are available, or how much technology is available to get those resources? As you can see, it's not just that there's too many of us, it's that there's also huge disparities between different populations on this planet. Notably in terms of water, where 1 in 6 people worldwide don't have access to safe, fresh drinking water. As you can see here, the population of the world will increase. The total amount of water on this planet will not change. It's still there. They talk about climate change, global warming, things like that. Okay, water's not going anywhere. It's right here. And there's a fixed, limited amount of it. Now these are just some stats that I pulled up that I thought were quite fascinating. This is for Mediterranean countries, so obviously you're not concerned. But it's interesting to see that all these countries that have been developed for a very long time have 60, 70% at best water efficiency. That means when they take water from a source, be it groundwater or whatever, and when they use that water, the end user, be it a tap or in agriculture, 30 to 40% of that water is lost in leaks. So there's a lot that we can do here to conserve water and to ensure that there will be enough water for the people who come tomorrow, for those 10 billion, for those 11 billion, for those 12 billion people who will come, and who will each want more. At least that's the way our society is going. Another quote from my father about his visits in Africa and seeing little girls running for water in a bucket that looks like it's going to fall into pieces instead of going to school. Because, in his mind, population boom was one of the major challenges that we would be facing this century. And he said the only way to limit population is to give education and basic services to people. You give them water, you give them education, you give them health, you give them retirement. And automatically, countries go into a demographic transition, and you have less or more stabilized population growth. Well, there are solutions here. And actually, all of these solutions make economic sense. Again, it's not always about being a good guy. It's also about making economic sense. And here we can see, according to this study, that if you provided universal access to improved water and sanitation by 2015 to everyone on Earth, the benefit to cost ratio would be 10. That means every dollar that you would invest in doing this, you would get $10 back. How and why? Well, because when people have improved sanitation and access to water, then you have a whole economic development for those people that's possible that wasn't possible before. You have a cutback on health problems, and it just has a positive impact on all of the economic development of the region. And my father, of course, who was always dreaming very big, had this dream. It would take $400 billion a year for 15 years. That's a lot of money. And that was in 1991. It's probably the same amount today. For 15 years, to rid the world of misery, provide drinking water, education, and retirement to everyone. Can you imagine that? Living on a planet where you know that every single human being has all of his needs fulfilled. Everyone has water. Nobody's starving. Everyone has education. Everyone has health access. Can you imagine that, just for a second? The pride that you would feel of being a human being, knowing that you're part of this community of people who are all potentially happy and striving in their lives. Not knowing that 1/6 of the population or more than that is being left behind completely. And that's about 1/3 of global military budgets. So, okay, he was, a military. He can say that. If you start asking the military for money for development, probably it's not going to happen. But anyways, that puts things into perspective, I think. Now, there are many solutions for the problems we face today. One of them is that we stop being an open-ended circuit, that we close the loop on our systems. That means that we use our waste to produce energy or to produce byproducts that can be useful for production, for industry, for whatever, to recycle basically. But this can be integrated into entire cities instead of having the open-end circuit of everything going into the ocean when we're finished with it. We can actually reuse that stuff, and it's beneficial for everyone. We can apply space technologies. Space technology obviously is based very much on trying to find ways of closing the loops on the water, food, and air cycles. So there are examples of space. We need more science. We need more technology to achieve these tasks. Other solutions consist in marine protected areas. These are places that we close off and we say, okay, we're not going to do any harmful activities in this place. No fishing, no trolling, no coastal development. This area we're going to leave and not touch. Traditionally, we would say nobody's going to touch it ever, but actually it doesn't make sense again because it has to make economic sense. Now, if you use marine protected areas to create tourism development, it becomes really interesting. These 3 little islands right here in Spain, Medes Islands, generate 6 million euros a year They've been protected for 20 years, and people come from all over the world to dive there because they know that you have fish this big, groupers this big, that are 40 years old, and you have amazing stuff. So 50,000, 60,000 divers a year come to this place just for diving, and snorkeling and glass bottom boat trips and whatever. Everywhere in the world, marine protected areas have been tested, they work. Every single time a place has been protected, it works. Life comes back. You get more biodiversity. You get more biomass, more abundance. This is after 5 years in average in marine protected areas. 500% in fish biomass increase. Protect an area, leave it for 5 years, you have 5 times more fish meat in that place. It's extremely efficient. We're trying to build one right now, actually, in Santorini, in Greece. And we're trying, actually, so through the network of dive centers that we're creating, we're trying to get each of them to get involved in creating marine protected areas. I'm going to get back to that now. So is that enough, creating little marine protected areas, recycling our waste and whatnot? Well, I was just saying earlier, I've been diving in marine protected areas, beautiful ones, amazing creatures, great sea life. It was fantastic diving. And when I came up from my dive, the last 3 meters, since I had gone diving, there was a soup of plastic. It was just a soup. And I came up through a soup of plastic. And it was really weird and really heartbreaking because I was thinking, we're trying to protect this area for future generations, for people to know in the future what the oceans are supposed to look like when they're healthy. At the same time, something that's going on thousands of kilometers away, that's the consequence of different countries throwing their plastic into the ocean, is ending up here and ruining this conservation work. So again, I'd like to insist on the fact that conservation is such a holistic approach, and that it's really difficult, again, to act on it on a national level. Even though it's extremely important to do so, the environment is always a connection between the 2 essential fluids of life, the water and the air, and you can't control those. There's no boundaries for those. So this is what my father's inspiring words about this is. Faced with growing disparities between the rich and the poor, faced with climate changes, biodiversity loss, and the dictatorship of materialism that we see today in our societies, we must resort to utopia. He believed that it would be extremely difficult to manage to change enough people in a short enough time to manage to reverse the tendency of our destructive activities on nature. But he said something will happen. These are his words. I didn't actually write the quote on this thing, but something will happen that will bring people together and make them realize that we need to act as one, that we need to act as stewards of the same ship, the planet Earth, rather than doing things in our corner as if there was no tomorrow. So, again, more quotes by my father. It's not only because we love nature's beauty that we want to protect it, but also because we love our fellow humans. Because, again, what we do to nature is connected to what happens to people. So now I'm going to take you on a little trip into the past, to visit the oceans of the past, because my father filmed, as you know, many different places around the world in many different years. And those documents are actually really interesting today because they give us an idea of what the health of the ocean was at a certain place at a certain time. If you go diving today anywhere, you see 2 fish, you'll be, wow, that's wonderful. But if you know that 20 years ago there was rays, sharks, dolphins, whatever, then you'd be like, wait a minute, I've been cheated. Something's happened. Where did the fish go? It's really important to set baselines in the environment to understand where we come from and what's happened. And this is an example, again, I apologize, it's a Mediterranean example. 1946 images. Some of the first images my father ever shot. Get out of your way. This is on a site just off Marseille in south of France. It's called Yves. And as you can see, it's really lush with life, large groupers, rays, dorados, corvinas. You have everything. And the fish are not afraid. Again, you don't have the audio here, but the fish are not afraid of the divers. They're not used to divers. They don't associate divers with trouble. They don't associate people with trouble. They're not afraid. And that's actually something quite interesting when you visit marine protected areas. You can see that the longer the place has been protected for, the less the fish are afraid of you. So they really learn to associate humans with death or with indifference. And in some occasions, in many of my father's movies, as you may recall, sometimes even friendship was created between humans and animals, wild animals. And this is wonderful moments of his movies that are very inspiring. And this is what my father filmed in 1977, the same spot. I'm not sure you can see very well, but there's really not that much to see. Yeah, there's actually nothing to see, so. It's the same spot. What happened is that the city of Marseille was getting really big, and they were piping out all their sewage right on there, right on that dive site, without treating the sewage. And there were no fishing regulations, so they just cleaned the whole place before dumping everything there. And it killed everything, obviously. And we returned there in 2010. National Geographic was doing an expedition there. And we saw that there was a little bit of recovery because the city of Marseille had installed a sewage treatment plant, because some fishing had been regulated. So again, what we do to our planet, to our environment, depends on us. We can be engineers of a better world. We can be engineers of an Eden on Earth. In the same way that we can be extremely destructive engines that destroy everything without thinking about anything else. So you can't really see that it's a bit better, but it is. So now I'm going to show you some pictures from the archives. So these are all from the Cousteau archives, taken in many different countries over the past 50 years. Beautiful photos from the archives. We have 1 million of these, 1 million still photos. I went through them and chose 1,000, digitized them. But there's 1 million, so it's really very useful material to make baselines and to understand what the evolution of the health has been in those places. Another quote, today every citizen considers himself a steward of passing water. And I'm not just saying this because we're with airBaltic. A steward of passing water. We will be very close to the answer. And it's in this philosophy and in this set of mind that I've developed the Cousteau Divers Project, which is a project that's aiming to unite people, ocean lovers, divers, snorkelers, everywhere around the world to help study and protect marine life. There's 3 parts to the program: science, community, multimedia. The scientific part is participative science. It's asking people who are not marine biologists to report some observations. It can be as simple as taking the temperature of the water. Online community, it's a bit like a Facebook for divers. And multimedia, again, I showed you a couple of the images from the past, and there's a big issue of comparing them with images of the present and the future to understand what's going on. This is a quick look at average, at the website. That's changed a bit actually since this picture. I should have changed it. This is a profile page, so you have your profile line, not my profile, but it's, you can see that you have your photo album, you have rankings here, so you get science points for reporting science observations, multimedia points for sharing images, etc. So kind of trying to make it entertaining and fun, because if it's not entertaining and fun, people aren't going to do it. And the idea is to involve people and to get them motivated and passionate, so you got to have them entertained at the same time. So we're addressing divers, dive centers, scientist schools, and other partners also. We just opened a kindergarten to 12th grade school in the USA just last week. That was the first one in the world. It was fantastic. The kids are going to be involved in interpreting the data that the divers send in through the internet. So the vision, the science vision, is the real-time monitoring of the health of the oceans. We want to be able to say the ocean is in this state of health right now. And if we do this, this is going to happen. We want to know what's going on and to tell people. Instead of having this barrier, this mirror that our eyes can't penetrate, it's the surface of the sea. We really want to bring the observations to life and help use that for the safer, more intelligent management of marine resources. Using dive centers as permanent observatories and encouraging them to create no-take zones, marine protected areas. Also, another thing we're doing is we're trying to get Cousteau dive centers throughout the world to go diving with the government. So you grab the government, you chuck them in the water, and you go scuba diving with them. And it's important, I think, because these guys, they're paid to manage the country, and there's a whole part of their country they never look at. They never even have one look at. So for me, it makes sense at the beginning, just when they're freshly elected, you take them and chuck them in the water. This is the slate. So One of the ways that divers can participate is by taking the slate underwater and recording their observations. As you can see, it's really easy, and we found it's still too complex for a lot of people to do this because they're a bit lazy. When they're diving, they don't want to be doing work. So we're actually in the process of simplifying this. But you can see it's just drawings, and you tag out what you see on both sides of the slate. Counting fish sizes, different types of biological cover, algae, bioindicator species. And so it's like a diving course, like you would have a specialty diver for cave diving or wreck diving or lake diving, Cousteau diving. So I was telling you, we have this Cousteau archive. It's made of 1 million still photographs, 5,000 kilometers of film. That's the length of Chile. That's too much film. We don't know what to do with it. But it's been collected in over 100 different countries over the past 60 years. So those, again, it's a very important timestamp. It's a very important baseline for the health of the environment. And we're asking people online on our website to upload their photos and their images and to compare them with the same photos and images that were taken 20, 30, 40 years ago, so that they can see the difference, that they can witness what's happening. We also have a Cousteau App, iPhone, iPad, and Facebook. It just came out last week. It's free for download, and inside it you'll find these cards that you can trade. So the idea is like having the sticker albums when you were kids, you know? It's the same thing. You trade your doubles and etc. Trying to keep my father's message alive and put it into the 21st century. For instance, this is one of the cards. A message of peace. How do you bring nations together? Well, here you have a card written by my father, and that tells you what he thinks we should do to have peace on earth. And the app is full of these things, these little keys of wisdom, my father's ocean wisdom. It's also full of user images. So if you upload your photos, your underwater photos with Cousteau divers, we select the best every week and we put them on the iPhone app. So now you have to imagine there's divers everywhere in the world, recording their observation, taking photos, uploading everything, the data, the temperature, the depth, the conductivity, the pH of the seas, bringing us all this information into our database, all geotagged, all time-stamped. Well, here we are, we have a near real-time monitoring diagnostic of the health of the oceans, and we can generate automatic alerts. That means that if there's a problem, a sudden loss in biodiversity, a sudden loss in biomass, we can act like an immune system and go find out what's going on with an in-depth scientific expedition and tell the local people, you know, you have this under the surface here. I know you can't see it, nobody sees under the surface, but this is what you've got under the surface. This is threatening it, and this is how you can prevent losing your resource. You can even make it an easy economic feasibility and see how much economic benefits are being derived from the healthy environment and how much will be lost by losing that environment. And it often quite adds up in favor of conservation. And that's about it. I'll leave you with this last quote. Impossible missions are the only ones who succeed. And I think another thing that my father was thinking about when he was talking about utopia was that a lot of us here are missing the two key elements to allow us to imagine a better world and to make it happen. That's time and imagination. Most of us don't have time, and we tend to lose our imagination compared to when we were kids. So my father would say, the only people who have the time and imagination to make this happen, to make a better world happen, to imagine new forms of society that can be sustainable for humans, for 10, 12 billion human beings, to live together on this planet in balance with their ecosystems. And the only people who have the time to do that in the imagination are university students, people who have time, a fresh young mind, to think about these things. So we have to encourage them to spend time doing so. And looking for the scientific and technical solutions to the problems that we'll be facing. The last piece of philosophy from my father, the green light. I don't know if you guys have ever seen sun setting on the horizon. You get a green light, just a green flash, the last second. I've never seen it, but I've heard about it. Nobody? Really? Okay, maybe it doesn't happen up here. But anyways, his idea is, he was seeing in the 80s already how governments and big corporations were not being very careful about the environment and how things were slipping as the population was booming. And he was saying, well, the sun is setting on the human race, on our civilizations here, because we're not taking care of our environment. The sun is setting, but will we perceive that last flash of green? Will that make us change our minds, change the way we act, the way that we live together, so that we can make it through the 21st century, which is not a given based on most scientific projections, with the fisheries collapsing, with the oceans acidifying, with the global climate change, etc. So green light, hopefully. But you've never seen one? Okay. They exist. They're out there. So that's it. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Jim, and I would like to ask, what we non-divers, non-biologists, is there anything we can do in everyday life?
Yes.
For example?
Well, one easy one, and that's a no-brainer, is to refuse throwaway plastic. So, plastic bag, plastic cup, plastic cutlery, plastic plates for dinner. I know it's easier because you don't need to wash the plates, but it's ending up in a turtle's mouth. And the plastic, we don't recycle any of our plastic in our society. It's really barely 1%. Barely 1% of all plastics used by the developed world is recycled. It all ends up in the ocean, breaks down, and then it infiltrates the food chain. So in the end, we end up eating that plastic. So if you want to have a purely humanocentric vision of why not to use plastic, throw away plastic, because it's going to end up in your body.
And what about closing the taps all the time? Does it influence the water system or not? Because this water still goes into the system again?
Yes, that's a very good question. And that's the question of consumption. How much do we need? How much do we want? How much do we take? How much are we entitled to? And again, I think we need to parallel that with the amount of people on this planet. Everyone's going to want more. Everyone's going to feel entitled to more. And this goes especially true with energy. We all feel that we need more energy every day. We need more energy for heating, we need a computer, and even a cell phone. Energy is a big, the big use that we make of it. And we're always looking for ways of finding more energy. So more fuel, digging deeper in the ocean, getting more nuclear power plants, whatever. We're always looking for ways, or solar panels. We're always looking for ways of getting more power. What about thinking of ways of using less power? And therefore helping to solve the equation without thinking, oh, everyone's always going to need more power. Why don't we try to find, a balance somewhere where it's, a balance between how much comfort we have and how much impact we have on the environment?
We'll try.
Yeah.
And, it was mentioned that you work for European Space Agency. And
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit more what you're doing?
I was working in the European Space Agency, coordinating biology experiments in the International Space Station. It was fun.
Interesting.
Yes.
But it wasn't connected with you being working for NASA, for this space agency, like main thing of your career. So you were kind of doomed to be a diver because you're Cousteau.
Well, it's I think I probably have a conservation chromosome in me somewhere. Yes. But it's diving is something I really love. I've done it since I was 9 years old, and I just absolutely love it. And I'm only happy underwater. So as soon as I can get underwater, I get underwater. So for me, it made a lot of sense to pursue the diving, which is why I call it Cousteau Divers. And it's all about divers and going in the water. And I actually do a little bit too many of these presentations and not enough scuba diving. But I'm following my passion, which is scuba diving.
And what about this project, Cousteau Divers? Is there any real output? For example, these divers upload data about oceans and so on. And you mentioned that then you can compare data from the past and data with present and advise countries if they're doing something wrong.
Yes.
So is there any real output? So you consult governments, advising them to do this and that, or you're just starting?
The thing is, well, we're just starting. I created the website about 11 months ago. So we're not at the point yet where we can react to problems. We're still trying to set out the network of data collection. Once we have that in place, then we can start thinking about how do we react to alerts. And you were talking about governments. I think one of the main problems with environment management is that it's too centralized. If you decentralize environmental policy, then you could have local places that would take environmental measures locally, more adapted to their situation. because the government has to manage obviously a whole country and sometimes can't zoom in to the local problems. So instead of going to a president and knocking on his door and giving him a piece of paper, a report, it's more about interlocking with the local actors and making them understand that it's in their interest to protect the environment, their economic interest first off, and health also, as I was saying before, a whole bunch of other good reasons to conserve the environment.
To be honest, I don't quite believe that centralized management will work in places like Africa or something. But let's see.
Well, the thing is, you actually don't need the government. So here, let me tell you how. Imagine, you know that there's a place where you want to make a marine protected area. If you go in there and you talk to the people who are using the resources, you talk to the fishermen, you talk to the hotels, you talk to the restaurants, talk to the people who are making an economic development around this area. And you show them and you prove to them it's in their interest. To leave this part alone, develop this one in this way. It's more an economic development consulting, if you want. That's in the interest of, again, economic interest of the people. Than saying, oh, the government said this, no, you're not allowed to dive here. You're not allowed to fish here, you're not allowed to do anything. So it's really about getting people to realize that it's in their interest and then hopefully that they make more enlightened decisions.
So it's all about education, like your father said.
Yes, very much. Very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sarah?
Good luck.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that has 10 questions in a row?
I'm sorry.
No. Yes.
Thank you very much. You told us a lot about your father's dream, but do you have this impossible, maybe insane dream of our environment? What we should do?
Well, again, regarding the oceans, I don't think we can take any decisions reasonably without having the right information about the situation. To manage a resource, you need to know what's there. And that's why this is kind of a step before even taking any decision. It's the step of, assessing what's there, what we've got, where we are. And that's kind of the angle that we're taking. I don't know if that answers your question. Try me again.
Okay. Your father's dream was to create a peaceful world where everyone is healthy and happy.
Yes.
And what is your dream? Maybe you want to live
Well,
under the water and
yes.
just to
Well,
spend all
of
your
course,
life
I've had
there.
several ideas of things I want to do in my life. Making cities under the water would be fantastic. I'd love to do that, especially when you think of 100 years down the line, you've got all the nuclear reactors of Japan that are going to pop. Probably others along that are built on tectonic plates. Great guys, you built nuclear reactors on tectonic plates. Woo! And also with all the refugees from the climate change refugees. So places in the world where there's millions of people living that are going to have to move. So I had this idea, it's a bit strange dream of having underwater cities and countries.
Yes, I thought about the same.
And milking manatees. Have you thought of that one?
Interesting. What is easier, to make a base on Mars or Moon or underwater?
Actually, it's harder underwater. Because when you go into space, you have zero pressure. But the deeper you go, the more pressure you have, and it doesn't stop. So the challenge when you go deep is, not to get everything crunched under its own pressure. Whereas when you go to space, once you've resolved the zero pressure outside, 1 atmosphere inside, you're fine. But when you go down, you have a lot more differential of pressure.
But maybe it's easy to produce oxygen from the water than outer space.
Yes, that's true. That's very true, yeah. There's a lot more that you can do from the resources. You can get oxygen, you can get hydrogen for fuel, potentially. You can get a lot of things out of the water, that's true.
And actually, I would like to say that it was very pleasant to see that your father cared about Homo sapiens as well, because sometimes those who protect nature are real human haters. They think
Yes.
it could be a kind of cancer or virus or something. But it seems that your father cared about humanity as well. In some ways, not just about nature. Like,
Yeah. No, you're right. There's different ranges of philosophies when it comes to environment, and there are you'll find everything from people who want to tarmac Africa to people who want to wipe out the human race. And there's a very wide spectrum right there between the two. So I think, yeah, there's no reason to protect the environment if it's not for us and our children. And it wouldn't make sense to sacrifice human lives for the environment.
It's very nice, really.
And I think it's... questions?
Maybe you can share some special moment with your father, like you go up on the...
Well, maybe if you buy me a beer. Anyone else?
Moment you remember?
I mean, that's kind of a personal question.
I know, but everybody saw that in the movies, I know the credits, so everyone... So when you get to
Okay.
go up.
No, right now, just like that, no. It's going to take a beer. At least.
Which kind of governments or countries do you see as role model for the environment, how they are dealing with it?
It's difficult again to answer that question because I don't think that this kind of questions can be answered by one government. I think it has to take place on a global level. The same way that you have the United Nations and the United Nations Environmental Program, I think we need to have an international environmental agency that has some delegated power from the countries to take measures in terms of water and air quality, at least for those two resources. There was one country on Earth that I would, and I don't know enough about it to say for sure, but I think, example of Costa Rica is pretty impressive, that they've just done away entirely with their military force to invest everything in health and education. And they have one of the best health systems in the world. So I suppose that answers your question.
You have a quite specific understanding of the environment in oceans. If you see a lot of TV programs, a lot of films, science fiction, which ones make you most mad?
Mad? What do you mean?
I mean, for example, New York has frozen, or something coming away, like from the space and just smashes something, and then something appears to be quite cruel.
Well, it's okay if the hero kisses the girl at the end, then it's No, but again, yeah, with regard to all those movies, science fiction, my father used to say that, reality always goes further than science fiction. And Victor Hugo used to say, Jules Verne, he used to say that you cannot imagine something that doesn't exist. So everything that you can imagine does exist or will exist. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So we're just thinking the wrong way. If we think about all this.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, this planet can go wrong 100 different ways. And Hollywood knows that, and they're making money from it. But it can also go right. And, with marine protected areas, with species reintroduction programs, with all the great work that's being done by environmental organizations all around the world, we have examples and we have demonstrations that we can be engineers of an Eden, the Garden of Eden. We can make this planet beautiful, and we can aspire to those dreams of having a whole human population living happily and healthfully. Those things are not out of reach. I don't think so, really.
Yeah, but you can protect the wells in one place and then they go besides and get cleaned or...
That's why, again, we need these international regulations. For migrating species, it's the same as for the air and for the water, of course, because they don't want to be found there. Those are difficult questions regarding the Japanese, because they will argue that it helps them to maintain a fishing catch, to reduce the predators of the fish, so that's fishing regulating managing their resources, what they're calling it. So that just depends on what level of importance you can grant to a species that's not human, a dolphin or a whale. How do you value it? It's actually quite interesting sometimes to look for the value of species. So a dolphin will be worth don't know how many million or hundreds of millions in a dolphinarium, but those are horrible conditions for that dolphin to live in. It will also be worth maybe a little bit less free in the wild, where divers will pay to come and dive with it. So putting a price on ecosystem services is a major part of conservation.
If we think about, there's a lot of people sure around, something is going different in the world now. Well, like conservative beings maybe, but what do you think? What is going to happen, or what is happening now?
Well, in 20 years ago, in 1992, at the Rio summit, all of the countries in the world came together and said, we are going to protect 20% of the ocean by 2010. Right now, we're about at 1%. So, that didn't work out too well. But we're trying with our organization, many other organizations out there are trying to push forward for marine protected areas, large scale, small scale, all over the world. If we can get 20% of the oceans protected, it will help in the sense that these places will refurbish with life. They will be like seeds. So when we're done destroying the rest of the oceans, these seeds can help recolonize the oceans with biodiversity and increasing the resilience of the ocean to the impacts that we're going through. Yes.
What is the best place to start diving?
To start diving? Right here. You'll probably start diving in a swimming pool, the first 5 lessons, and then you have to go into sea for a validation. So that's, I don't know.
But across the world, which one do you like?
Across the world?
Yeah.
I love the Canary Islands in the Atlantic in front of Morocco. Beautiful islands, incredible diving. They're beautiful both on top and underneath the sea. They're not very far away. They're great. So dolphins, whales. A lot of these pictures I showed you were from.
Yes, in your opinion and according what you have seen, which regions in the world now are most endangered, and is there something, some actions have been done to reduce that?
Well, that's a hard one. There's a lot of places in developing countries that are just, I don't know how to say it in English, open roof, open sky scrapyards. You have almost entire countries in Africa or in Asia that are just dumpsters of our junk. Our old computers, our old printers, our old cell phones. And there's...
In the ocean?
Well, in the ocean is where most of the plastic goes, but you also get, we export our trash. All of our trash goes to these countries and just landfills them completely. And a lot of people live on that, actually, recycling parts, finding things like that, scavenging. But this paints a very grim picture for humanity of living like rats, trying to, digging through trash to find what's left and making good use of it. I mean, some will call it recycling. Okay. But in terms of human dignity, it's not exactly where we want to be. So I think that's what shocks me most. It's when human dignity is baffled and in conjunction with environmental reasons.
These developing countries will never think about the environment until they have economic problems and so on, because they have another priorities. So it's really hard to believe that all countries of Africa suddenly will be aware of dying species or something.
Well, yeah, especially since we send them all our junk, and then we fish all their fish. So yeah, you're right. There's very, very little chances that they will catch on the same way that we have. But I think it's really hard. Of course, we have our industrial development that's been going on for 100 years in Europe, and or more, and that's created economic conditions, but also environmental consequences that we today can learn lessons from. But all these developing countries, you can't tell them, oh, you don't develop the same way we do. Listen to what we say, but not to what we do, that kind of thing. It's extremely difficult to do that. But again, that's where education comes into place. And also finding new ways of living together, new forms of civilization.
Maybe you can tell us about this project with National Geographic? Is it still processing or it's already over?
It's over. It was in June 2010.
Yes, as far as I know, you were comparing past
Yes.
and today.
Yes, well, some of these images that you saw
Yes.
are from
Yes,
that comparison.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Well,
what
the
is-
idea was to go through different marine protected areas and to see if they work, to assess the environment inside and outside the marine protected area. And so for 1 month we did this. We went to 4 different places and we saw huge differences. Just like 100 meters outside the reserve and inside is nothing to do, no comparison. If you protect a place, it works. It's beautiful. And that's the message of the movie, that there's an efficient conservation solution that works every time it's applied all around the world, and that's creating marine protected areas. And they're also good for the economy. Yeah.
We have some, it's a personal question. If you have some
I'm gonna get a lot of
mantra
beers
or
tonight.
credo for your life or inspiration,
Wait, what's it? A credo?
credo mantra which you maybe heard from your
No,
father.
actually I don't. No.
You should have.
After a few beers, I tend to have several different ones. Oh, I've always done this, and da 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 da. Anybody else, maybe?
Can I ask you,
Yes.
why did you choose Santorini, future sector?
So
Right now it's not very good for diving.
you're right, absolutely. That's why.
Not much to
That's
see,
exactly why.
honestly.
Yes, when I left the European Space Agency, I went diving there to become a dive master and an instructor. And it's beautiful crystal waters, they're fantastic landscapes. There's nobody, there's no fish. And there's very little marine life there. And still, among all the islands of cichlids, it's one of the highest biomasses that's been found. Even though there is nothing, it's better than everywhere around it. So that's why we chose that area to protect it and to create a demonstrator. There's no marine protected areas in Greece at all. So to create a demonstrator of the socio-economic benefits derived from protecting an area, so that hopefully the fire will catch and we can have a network of marine protected areas through the cichlids and through Greece, through the Mediterranean, through the world and the universe.
Sounds even better.
How many years do you think it will take to?
I hope that
grow
we'll have.
its
I hope that
size?
we'll have the community of Santorini motivated and inspired to do this and to make this marine protected area happen before the end of this year.
But how long do you think it will take for this species to come back?
5 years, 500% biomass.
Okay, so 5 years from now, meeting Santorini.
Yes, come to Santorini diving. Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah. We have also the Cousteau diving, the third Cousteau diving center in Santorini.
Yes, there's a Cousteau dive center there. That's
Dangerous place, it can erupt.
yeah. Well, that's already put out a few civilizations.
It's
Yeah.
steaming a little.
Yeah. It's actually really interesting because the story of Santorini, I don't know if all of you know the story, many of you do, I'm sure.
Volcano.
But it's a volcano that exploded, that made the largest explosion that all of humanity ever saw. And this huge explosion that's responsible, that's been correlated with a lot of the
Bible.
biblical passages, with the ashes and the etc. Tsunamis that were created, maybe even the waters parting for Moses. That's Santorini. That's Santorini exploding and the waters getting engulfed in the hole and then spraying back out. And that devastated an entire civilization that was really prospering at the time. And it's really interesting to see that a whole civilization, that's international, that has economic ties with other countries, neighboring countries, all of a sudden overnight, gone. And it kind of makes you think, well, okay, maybe we should do as much as we can to prevent that from happening to us and try to manage efficiently our environment.
And how exactly these protected areas work? For example, if water is polluted somewhere nearby, water is mixed up and so the protected area is polluted as well.
That's
So
right.
what do you do to protect the area?
Well, you don't choose one that's next to a... you don't put one next to one of those. And if you put one next to one of those and then you see pollution, if there's a law regulating it, you can use that law to force the people to be more careful with their pollution.
But do you limit fishing or?
Yes, usually
something else?
the way marine protected areas work in general is that there's a core where you can't do anything at all. No fishing, no diving, no snorkeling, no tourism. Nothing. Very small, very protected area. Around it, you have another area where you can't fish, but you can dive, you can snorkel, you can come with your boat and throw your anchor or whatever. You'll be careful. And then outside that, you have no regulations. So there's those 3 levels. You also have marine protected areas where you're allowed to fish, and I never understood why they even call them marine protected areas. But yes.
How much time does it take for the ocean to recover after oil spills?
That's very difficult to say, actually. Oil spills and radioactive waste. It's very difficult to say because oftentimes there's no information. What happened in the Gulf of Mexico was terrible, but nobody knows what they had there before. If this program had been running for 10 years, we could say, oh, well, this, and this has changed, and this is gone, and this is, but nobody has done that before. So in the end, the oil company ended up paying the fine per barrel that was dumped, but no fine for damage, because nobody knew what the damage was. And we still don't know what the damage is. And for what's going on in Fukushima with the radioactive waste that was put out, water that was put out into the ocean, who knows what's going to happen with that? Who knows where that's going to go and what consequences that's going to happen with that? So for those examples, it's really difficult. But that's why it's so important to have a baseline study worldwide collecting these information. It's like the ocean is like, the earth is like a patient that's sick and that can't talk and tell you what's wrong. So you have to make these measurements to understand how it's going and to monitor its vital signs. And that's what we're trying to do with this project.
You have studied space. How does it go together with your ocean studies?
Space and ocean?
Yeah.
Well, there's several things. First of the weightlessness. So when you're in space, you're weightless. You find the same feeling. No, I haven't. I almost did a parabolic flight. So you can get a couple seconds of weightlessness when you do a parabol in an airplane. You also get very sick, I heard. Yes, there's the weightlessness, the feeling of entering a new world, being in a different environment. And then, as I told you earlier, there's the connection with my previous passion for astrobiology and looking for the origins of life, and how if you look through the universe for life, you can see the building blocks. So the molecules are all there in the universe. We have no sign that they've come together to make life. And it seems that perhaps even on Earth would be where life originates from the bottom of the oceans, from the hydrothermal vents there. So there's a connection between the two. And when you go deep the diving, sometimes you see creatures and you feel like they're aliens. So it's great. There's your connection right there.
Fish might think exactly the same thing about.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Oh yes, especially when you're wearing very flashy colored wetsuits.
Talking about astrobiology, now everybody's searching for traces of water on Mars or something and says, okay, there was water on Mars, so there could be life. But why everybody's so determined that life can't exist without water? Maybe there were completely different forms of life developed.
Yes. Well, water has several physical characteristics that are absolutely unique as a liquid, as a gas, in its transition of phases as well. And there's no other known molecule that can do these things. For example, the fact that ice floats on water. If ice didn't float on water, there would be no life on Earth. Because everything would be frozen.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking maybe there's a completely different form of life, non-dependent on water somewhere in the universe.
Oh, that's a possibility, yeah. If you can imagine it, maybe it's true.
But everybody searches for water. You also mentioned that water equals life.
Yes, water equals life, yes.
But maybe only on our planet.
You don't go so far yet.
Well, you're right. Maybe there's organisms that strive in petroleum or methane or whatever, and maybe they'll come right after us on this planet. I don't know. No, life depends on water. Even carbon. Some scientists have been doubting that carbon would be essential for life. So that you could replace carbon with other things that have the same kind of physical characteristics of their atoms, but you can't replace water. In the equation of astrobiology, I don't think any scientist has even dared to imagine life without water. But that would be interesting, yeah.
Now, what's the maximum depth you have dived? Maybe you know.
55 meters.
Maybe you know what's the maximum depth that your father had.
Yeah. I went to 55 meters, and when you go down under 35, 40, you start getting narcosis. So it's like drunk. It's like if you had alcohol. Same thing. So you go underneath 35, 40 meters, and all of a sudden, boom, something happens. And it's different every time. So either you're paranoid and you're always looking at your air, or you're really laughing every time someone looks at you, or something like this. But in any case, it's very dangerous because you obviously lose a sense of reality.
But you got special equipment.
But then after that, that's why you mix gases to go deeper, to reduce the nitrogen in the area that you're breathing. Because the nitrogen is what causes the drunkenness. But I know my father, from reading some of his stuff, was diving down to 100 meters on air and sending teams to do it all the time. I mean, 100 meters, if you send me to 100 meters, I will just take everything off and swim with the dolphins. It's just really, but they're trained. If you go down slowly, progressively, more and more, you can do it. It's very dangerous. Nobody does it today. Diving 100 meters on air is suicidal. But today you have the correct gas mixtures, and it's a lot more, but you still get a lot of accidents. Technical diving is still, can be dangerous.
Yeah. People insulated. So you had your presentation last a few weeks ago. One of the people who knew the divers who worked with your father in Greece. We're talking about one diver who passed away because he was diving in Dove. They were 100 feet, and when he said when he went up, his face was swollen. The whole thing went wrong.
Well, the thing is, when you dive, you're breathing in the gas at the same pressure at the depth you're at. So the deeper you go, the more pressure the gas is. So this gas dissolves into your tissues at that pressure. And when you come up, you have to come up slowly, or else you fizz like a Coke can that you shake and it's the same thing. So I suppose that's what happened to him. He must have had all the bubbles. Yeah, that's kind of a nasty way to go. No,
Why not?
I would love to, but actually I have a little bit of a sensitivity to my sinuses up here. So when I go down, I need to go down slowly. The guys who do
And then you still breathe.
and I breathe, so I can go as slowly as I want. But the people who do breath hold diving, they need to go down fast.
Yes.
And my sinuses can't take that.
But that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, it sounds so.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Do you like fishing?
Do I like fishing? No. I don't. I don't like fishing. I remember, here's for childhood memories. I remember fishing when I was a little kid. Like in a little lake or something, and I was revolted by even the concept of putting the live worm on the hook. First thing, so catching the fish. Okay, I caught the fish, but then taking it off the hook, and I was like, no, come on! I mean, look, this poor fish is suffering, and I don't need to do this to feed myself. But no, I don't like fishing. I understand some people do, but I have to say, sport fishing and leisure fishing has some serious environmental problems because a lot of people are doing it, and this is not regulated. On one side, you have the commercial fishing that is regulated by European quotas, even though those quotas are already above what the scientists are saying. But on top of that, you need to add all the people who are leisure fishing, and often they'll just go in and take whatever they can, no matter the size. I'm not saying that's the case for everyone. I'm sure there's very responsible fishermen, and the fishermen are often the people who know the sea the best. So I think they need to play an important role in conservation. But yeah, not me personally.
Good answer.
I don't think it's a little cruel to catch a fish and then it's like it has danger and then you let it go and you don't really know whether it will survive or not.
Yes, I agree with you.
But like if you punch someone and then you see how it crawls further, and then it goes, or that's
Yes. Well,
makes two or very kill it.
well, you know, that really depends on how we
No, just
position.
don't do it. I mean, either you take it and eat it, or don't. You know, let it be.
Okay. Well, it really depends on how you position the human species with regard to the other one. A lot of people, most of us here probably, consider humans are above the rest of the species and have the right to use those species as they wish. And that's, you know, that's what we've been doing for thousands of years. And where do you draw the line? You know, a fish, for you maybe it's a fish. You don't like to see a fish being harmed. Someone else it'll be a dolphin. They don't want to see a dolphin getting harmed. Someone else it'll be a fly. They don't want to see a fly getting harmed. So it really depends on each person. But it's interesting to see that through time, the evolution of human species on Earth, our empathy, our feeling of empathy has evolved. So at the beginning, we only had empathy for people that were our own blood, our children, our family. After that, we started growing in empathy for people that had the same beliefs, the same religion. Then we started having the empathy for people who had the same country, the concept of nation. And now we're growing into an era where our empathy is extended not only to all the people on Earth, but to other species as well, including dolphins and whales and fish and whatnot. So there's an evolution here in human species, I think, in terms of the evolution of our empathy.
Yeah, but we also grew in technical means of destroying the rest and ourselves. Like, even if you have one person who has no empathy whatsoever, but if he or she does not have any means of destroying anyone else, though he or she is not very good person, does not leave too much impact on the environment, while us, even having good level of empathy, we still influence the environment in a much more harmful way
Yes.
than the first person.
Yes, yes, yes. No, I agree with you. Technological development,
That
scientific
goes
development
together.
goes together, absolutely.
You see that questions here slowly, we get fewer and fewer, but so let me take the authority on interrupting, and actually I suggest that what we do here is that we can slowly round up, and I will do that by actually having, giving you some gifts, and then those people who are really interested to continue, and you can see, mingle around for a while before we let Pierre go. So I think what we've here you see we've taken care of good crispy weather. It's a bit cool, so. So I think I actually noticed you don't have a scarf, so it's warm up. And,
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And actually we are first airline in the world to produce shoes for no airlines. Thank you, Pierre, so much.
And the light beam on the horizon is a Baltic.
What?
Green light on the horizon.
The green light on the horizon.
You can't use that.
But we commercialize everything, so don't worry. But thank you so much, and I think we can give Pierre a round of applause.
Pierre wanted to have a beer. There's no beer.
Yeah.
Beer comes later, so.